This presentation will provide an example of using the Absorb, Do, Connect activity structure model to create a hybrid learning experience for a 7-week class. I want to start by apologizing to all business instructors. I'm using an example that I made up completely out of my own head. It probably bears no actual relationship to what you would do in a business class. If it does, I'm sure that you would do a much better job. So just bear with me and accept this for what it is, just an example. The Absorb, Do, Connect process is a 3-part way of thinking about an activity cycle or a learning cycle that engages students in learning in a variety of ways. It was primarily designed for online learning, but it works quite well in the hybrid approach. And I find that it's an effective way to make sure that you're connecting your in-class and your out-of-class portions of the learning experience. The Absorb part of the Absorb, Do, Connect is where you introduce a topic and provide information. Think of this as the part of this structure where students gain information, they're soaking in new information. The Do portion of this structure is where students get a chance to apply that information and practice their skills or new skills. They get to combine their new information or their new skills with their prior learning. The Connect portion of this activity cycle is where students make links between their new knowledge or their new skills and the real world. It was envisioned by Horton for a book that he called E-Learning by Design, written in 2011. I encourage you to check it out. Let me provide a little context for this imaginary model. Let's imagine we have an instructor for a business class who's been tasked with designing a 7-week hybrid version of the class. Starting with the concept of backwards design, by starting with the outcomes and then designing the learning for those outcomes, the instructor looks at this and he sees 2 outcomes that seem to have synergy. 1 is working effectively in groups, and 2 is developing strategies for dealing with customer relationships. So the instructor creates an Absorb, Do, Connect cycle that includes a bridge that introduces this concept, an online activity for Absorb, an online activity for the Do portion, a face-to-face Do activity, and an online Connect activity. Let's take a look at each of these in a little more detail. As an overview, our face-to-face Connect is serving as a bridge. It's also really a good connect activity, which is interesting because a lot of times we think of connecting after the activity is over, but in this case we're using a connect activity as the bridge to get students interested in the activity and excited about it. The next part is the online portion of this, where you have students absorbing information or soaking in information simply by doing some reading and a learning check quiz. The next part is also done online, probably in the same time frame as the online Absorb activity. This is a Do activity, which is an assignment, which I'll get into details later. Then there is a face-to-face component, which is a Do. It's a group-based active learning. Then finally, this activity cycle concludes with an online Connect assignment with a sharing component. So let's look at the bridge, the Connect, that very first thing. So at the end of a face-to-face class, probably the last 10 or 15 minutes of a class where other things have been going on, the instructor wraps this up by showing the United Breaks guitar video. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. Look it up, and also search for the story. You'll gain some background on how customer service and social media are very much connected in the modern era. So the instructor probably also tells the story of how social media and customer service are now connected, using this as an example and perhaps providing some additional, more current examples that are interesting and would be known to the students. The students leave the class, and then their assignment in their hybrid portion of this class is to do some reading. They have a chapter section and a professional periodical reading about social media and small business, probably related to social media, small business, Twitter and customer service, or social media and customer service examples. So the instructor also creates a learning check quiz, and a learning check quiz is different than a summative quiz. A learning check quiz is one that is used by students to understand whether or not they have learned what they need to learn. This learning check is envisioned as being one that draws 10 questions randomly from a 50-item quiz bank, configured to allow students only 10 minutes to complete the quiz, and then students may take the quiz up to 3 times, retaining the highest grade. The question bank may be one that's provided by the publisher, which you simply download and then import right into JetNet, and or it might be a set of questions that the instructor would create, perhaps create some questions related to the professional periodical reading and use question bank materials provided by the publisher for the chapter reading out of the text, as an example. The whole idea of a learning check isn't really to test students' knowledge, it's to let the students test their knowledge, and we let them take it multiple times as a way to motivate them to dredge their brain through the content multiple times so that they soak in that information more than if we just give them a reading assignment and then don't check. The next part of this activity cycle is the do. It's also going to take place online. And this is an assignment the instructor creates that requires students to choose a company from a list. And those companies are those that have an active social media presence. Students are required to review 1 week social media activity on at least 2 different platforms, for example, Facebook and Twitter. Then they identify one example of how the company interacted with customers and critique the example using the criteria which are provided in the reading and any discussions you might have had. Might be a good idea in something like this to provide a template where the student could fill out a template and upload that, and that template would attempt to capture some key elements that would help guide the student's investigation and critique of the social media activity that they're reviewing. Next, in the face-to-face class that would be following the very next day or over the next week, the instructor sets up an active learning. The active learning in this case is for the instructor to create small groups or use existing small groups in the class, and then assign each small group to create a social media customer relationship plan for a fictional small business. That customer relation plan might also have a template provided by the instructor that would guide the students through a brainstorming activity, connecting their ideas to the literature that they've read and the readings and any other engagement that they've done, and then provide an output template that structures how they create the product that they provide for evaluation. This might take the form of a 1-page paper or perhaps an executive summary and several paragraphs or a structured engagement, a structured production. Or it might be something like a presentation that they would throw out as a way to share their ideas with others in the class. Finally, after that face-to-face class is over, they have one more assignment in this activity structure, and that is a connect activity, which would be a Q&A or question and answer discussion on JetNet that has students search for jobs that include customer relationship requirements in the description. Students then in that Q&A forum share the posting and discuss how what they've learned about customer relations and social media would help them get the job, and then how to succeed once they got that job. So again, back to the context, by using the Absorb, Do, Connect learning cycle, this instructor has created a hybrid class approach for the 7-week class structure that helps students work towards meeting 2 of the class outcomes, in this case, working effectively in groups and developing strategies for dealing with customer relationships. Just a review, Absorb, Do, Connect. Absorb is where you introduce the topic and provide information, soaking in information, readings, lectures, presentations. Do is where the student applies the information and practices the skills, combining their new information or new skills with what they've already learned. And then Connect, making linkages between their new knowledge or their new skills and the real world. As always, if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to talk to you, help you develop these kinds of activities for your class.